is a very interesting mechanism because FEI doesn't use the general mechanisms that we are seeing. FEI is a bit more, it plays around with new systems, right? And for those of you who don't know what's going on with FEI, FEI is one of these algo stable coins, and you put ETH in, it prints a stable, it's called FEI. FEI is like that $1. So you put ETH in, it prints out $1, and then you can use that $1. There are two main differences in the system. The first one is part of the ETH that is created is held by the protocol. And why is the system doing that? Because it maintains that $1 of FEI using Uniswap pools. And so in Uniswap liquidity pool, you have amount of ETH in there, and then you can mint $1. And so if it goes below $1, there's a mechanism or system that does that, where it removes liquidity until it manages to pair out both FEI and ETH, the value of FEI and ETH in the liquidity pool, returns the assets back, and maintains that peg. So that's in general how it manages the stabilization, right? Then the other thing about FEI is that, yes, we have that ETH to $1 peg, but there is a small tweak inside that I think a lot of these people they didn't realize, is that there's a taxation to being part of the system. So just like how in MakerDAO you want to be part of MakerDAO, you also put ETH in to get your stable DAI out. There is a form of taxation which is the stabilization fee. So like this interest rate or taxation, whatever you want to call it, this amount of money that you have to pay. So this amount of money that you have to pay is available in FEI by you minting, like turning FEI into ETH or turning ETH into FEI. And this mechanism changes, so this amount of money, this like interest rates or taxation method, it changes based on how far the peg is, how far the asset is from the peg, and it's squared. So if it's 1 cent away, then it's squared, so the punishment is 2 cents. So you have to pay 2 cents instead of 1. And if it's like 10 cents difference, and then if you square it, it's $1 difference. So there is that punishment almost for people to withdraw their tokens if it's less than $1. So that's their stabilization mechanism, right? And that's the general idea of how it works. One of the biggest issues in FEI is when they started, they used a bonding curve, which is great. Everyone loves bonding curves these days. And how bonding curves work is the first X amount of people that comes in, I don't know how many, but the X amount of people, they can buy FEI at 50 cents, and FEI will be trading at $1. So if you come in at 50 cents, it's trading at $1, you have 50 cents for free. Yeah, of course, everyone's going to ape in. Nobody's going to care what kind of taxation there's going to be. Nobody's going to care how it stabilizes. There's 50 cents for free, just going to ape in. There are also a lot of big people talking about it, so everyone just goes in. So it became oversubscribed, and the bonding curve has this range where it starts at 50 cents and it ends at $1.01. So you're basically paying more. You're paying $1.01 to get $1 out. So you're overpaying by 1 cent, overpaying by 1%. And because it's oversubscribed, the way bonding curve works is that when it hits the upper limit, then everyone is going to be buying at $1.01. So that's the general idea. And when people realize that, people wanted to leave, wanted to exit, but they couldn't exit because of the taxes, that taxation method that I was talking about, and it liquidated. So it became very expensive to leave. People didn't want to leave, and so that was one of the problems. The other problem is this FEI protocol has two tokens, the FEI token and also the tribe token. So the tribe token is the whole governance token thing. The reason why people at $1.01, people are still willing to put $1 in is because although they're paying $1.01 and getting out $1 only, they also get the tribe tokens. So they value the tribe token at more than 1 cent. Hence, it's a rational thing, right? It's rational to put money in to get 2 tokens out that's worth more than $1.01 to you. So that was the general idea. So yes, although they put FEI, they had FEI at a cheaper rate, they still had tribe, the governance token. And what happened with the governance token is that, okay, sure, you have governance token available, but you know what? You can't remove it. You can't liquidate your tribe tokens because on Uniswap, which is how all these things are being traded, Uniswap doesn't allow you to, or they didn't have liquidity pools to liquidate your tribe for anything. So, you can only do it for FEI. So what you have to do, you have to turn your tribe into FEI, which increases the amount of FEI in the space, and then from FEI to ETH. And that's where the taxation comes in. So it became everyone wanted to liquidate, everyone wanted to leave the system. It was so expensive to leave the system. And then there was this whole situation about it. So that's the general idea of what happened with the FEI protocol. And when we talk about, community aside, this kind of systems aside, just the stabilization mechanism and the mechanism design, it is actually very interesting because it provides this thing called direct incentives. So direct incentives and direct punishments to affect people's behaviors, right? Because economics is really about three things: punishment, incentives, and behaviors. Behaviors will be like coordination or cooperation between decentralized people, or behaviors will be the direct things that people are doing as an individual. So these are behaviors that we're talking about. And so we're providing direct incentives and direct punishments to affect behaviors directly. And that's the idea of FEI. So that's the mechanism design, right? And these kind of direct incentives, it's not anything new. It's not good or bad. You have these kind of systems like if you go to the supermarket, if you buy plastic, or if you didn't bring your own recycle bag, you use the plastic bags, you have to pay like 50 cents. So that's direct incentives. It affects people's behaviors. Then we combine this with people, with the community, and you have to understand that the community is all of these people. They just ape into stuff. They didn't check. They didn't understand what's going on. They didn't read so much about all these different systems, how it's working, how the taxation is done, and they were not educated enough or they didn't educate themselves. They didn't do enough research to figure out how the system works. So when things go against go against what they wanted to do, things went south quite quickly. And one of the biggest challenges with stablecoins is that you have to really rely on your community very, very, very much. I know it's the same thing for a lot of these other systems, right? Like Aave and Compound and everything. They're all platforms, so you need people to come in. But when it comes to stablecoins, it's even more important because if no one is using your stablecoin, and if people don't believe in your stablecoin, it goes to shit. So just like, in Argentina, no one really uses the Argentina peso because there's a lot of systems, a lot of problems with it. They don't believe in the government. People rather go to the black market and buy USD only when they have to make any payments. And that's one of the other, those are problems that you see in the physical real world. And it gets translated in the digital world in this kind of mechanisms. When we're designing systems, when we're analyzing these kind of ecosystems, it's very important to understand fundamentals, how they work. At the same time, it's also important to consider what's the response, what's the secondary and tertiary order of response of behaviors that people will likely display or the community will likely display, because it definitely affects the systems that is being designed or the systems being designed. Because economic design or token design, mechanism design, these are very important, and these are fundamental things that really affect how robust your system is, how robust your primary market is. But don't forget that your primary market also includes people, also includes community, also includes these kind of personalities, and they're very important to consider when you're designing ecosystems or when you're analyzing ecosystems, for sure. So yes, that's the general idea of FEI. I'm going to write them down into an article that will probably be out on Monday or Tuesday, because I think that's a very interesting experiment and conversation to start having. And I think another question worth asking is, what happens after that? What goes on after this crisis with FEI? I know the team is rebuilding. I know the team is working on it. That's great. But remember that the community is really, really part of this. And having faith in the community is also super important. Having faith and trust. Just like I have faith and trust in whatever government, being competent, being able to do different kind of mechanisms to allow the currency to be strong again. And that's one of the problems, I guess, in DeFi, is that it's kind of easy to enter because you can just fork a system, you can just create your own system, put it in a smart contract, ship it out, test it with the public, and you can test it very easily, no barriers to entry. At the same time, once it's failed, or once there are issues with it, the public sees it, the public understands that it's not doing very well, and once trust is broken, it's really, 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 really hard to get the trust back again. And sure, there are going to be a lot of diehard fans that will continue to stay in the community, and it's great for the community. But once the general public doesn't recognize the currency as being stable, or it doesn't have good faith, that the currency is able to maintain the peg, it becomes very challenging for it to be accepted by the even bigger public, the entire DeFi ecosystem. Because when we talk about network effects, we talk about market design, right? So economics design, you think about three things: market design, mechanism design, and token design. In market design, it's the design, or it's the understanding of how you define the digital environment which your tokens and participants exist in. So we can start small with just the community, having everyone accepting tokens, yeah, sure. But if you leave the community and you use FEI in Aave, if you use FEI in Bondbridge, if you use FEI in Hedgic, if they don't accept it, then the usability or the use case of your stablecoin, for instance, especially for stablecoin, goes down, and it really constrains the digital environment that the tokens and participants can exist in, and it becomes extremely challenging to bootstrap the community again, because once the faith is broken, the trust is broken, it's going to be quite hard. Then the other thing is mechanism design. So really the rules or the laws of how all these things work. And that's super fun, because this is where we can customize new kind of mechanisms. This is where we can experiment with new mechanisms. We can take a lot of theoretical things that we have in economics, which is so many. It's insane how many theoretical models that we create in economics. We can never really try them in the physical world because it's kind of hard to experiment with that. But today, we can take those experiments, we can take those models and experiment it in these kind of smaller ecosystems in DeFi. I think that's really cool. So this is one of the mechanisms that we tried. Maybe someone can fork it, someone can improve it, and then relaunch it under a different name. And the last one is token design. So token design is really everything, all the rules governing the tokens. And this could be the interest rates, this could be the different kind of property rights, for instance, in a token, or even the monetary policy. I call it the token policy because it's not always money. It's all within that token itself. So I think I don't think FEI is a dead on arrival kind of situation, but to bootstrap everything again, for the community to have that kind of confidence by so many, like $1.3 billion worth of ETH, again, I think that might be a bit more challenging. Yeah, be quite a challenge. If the team does it, really kudos to the team. Great team then.
I feel like corporate also lost their faith in FEI, like, Coinbase or A16Z. A lot of them seem to be talking, or at least haven't said that they've really given up on it yet. I'm getting the feeling that the big enough players, the ability to kind of invest in their premiums, now even snap up more of it. And then if it eventually gets its peg back, play the long game, and then come out like far ahead. Leshner on Twitter seems to be talking like that quite a bit. Do you think that that's a possible narrative here?
Yeah, that's a good point. So this is where we see, in DeFi, there's two conversations about it. One is about inequality, and one is about the power to do something about it. So when we talk about inequality, this is something that I'm kind of worried about, because in DeFi, there's so many people who have been in for a long time, and they have so much capital that it's okay to diversify part of that to very risky things like these kind of projects, and talk a lot about it on Twitter because they're very public personas. It's easy to share their perspective because they're also huge risk takers. But for a lot of people who are new in the space, they just follow these public personas, but they have a very different kind of risk profiles. So this is something that I am quite worried about, where we give too much recognition to influencers or public personas with a different kind of risk profile, and you kind of just believe, or you trust everything that they say. It's not that what they say is wrong, but they have a different risk profile, different risk appetite, and whatever they say might not be applicable to most of the public. And that's because there's a divergence in capital that they own, which is completely fine. It's how capitalism works. The other conversation is, can they do something about it? Okay, so you have a lot of capital, what can you do about it? Yeah, you can continue shelling it and get people to ape into it again. Or what you can do is, how can you as an organization, how can you come and help the system how can you bootstrap the system again? And how can you take on some of the losses for a greater good and improve the system? I think that would be a more important conversation. I have not seen a lot of those conversations yet. Maybe they're in discussion, I don't know. But I know, for example, Rune, the founder of MakerDAO, he put quite a significant amount of money in FEI, and he tweeted something about allowing FEI as collateral for MakerDAO. So this is where we go back to market design again, the whole usability outside of the protocol itself. This would be quite interesting because then you're not using tokens or you're not using FEI just to purchase and nobody really cares, or nobody wants to accept it, but you can use it in protocols as collateral. So we talked about it just now as well, where why would anyone mint $1 worth of thing, or $1 worth of asset to get something that's $1 worth? Maybe it's because that collateral, nobody really wants to accept it, and you can change it to something that's more liquid and use it. So for example, USDT is more liquid than, for example, USDC, which is also super liquid. But I know that a lot of people that I work with, they prefer receiving money in USDT than USDC. But USDC is like way more stable. And so the liquidity preference is also something to think about in this situation. So I don't know how these big institutional players are coming in, but the fact that they have capital, the fact that they have the network, the fact that they have the influence, if they can come together, coordinate some form of strategy to help FEI, that will be actually quite good. Then it goes back to the point of, are we truly decentralized? Because you can have a few people colluding together or cooperating together, whatever what you want to use, getting the kind of outcome. If it's for a greater good, yeah, sure, why not? But they can also do it as a bad actor, or they can act in bad faith, and that's kind of scary as well. So I have no idea. I don't know if that's good or bad. If they can do it for greater good, yeah. But having the power to also prove that they could become a bad actor, it's kind of scary.